And let's just dive in. And while we're waiting on questions to come into the chat, and this is for both of you, what is your recommendation or tips for how one can get started engaging with an LGBTQ plus business?
So tips for engaging with an LGBTQ audience, was that it? Ken, sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, yep, I'll repeat the question. Just from your viewpoint, how can one get started engaging with an LGBTQ plus business?
Definitely, I think the thing that I always go back to, and we talked about this in our breakout session, was sort of that walk the walk component, which is to look at if you're creating a space that is affirming and open and inviting, to look at the makeup of your team, to be open and out about having non-discrimination policies, to be taking measures to make sure that trans people feel welcomed and comfortable. I think it often, especially in the last 10, 15 years, has become just so critical for making sure that if you're looking to take that first step into this relationship, that you make sure that you look at, am I, before I market to this person and invite them into my space, is my space comfortable and safe for that person? I think that's kind of universal to any marginalized group. So.
And I would say Benjamin did a great job of discussing what to do internally. I would say externally, if you want to engage with LGBT-owned businesses, you should exchange American dollars for their excellent goods and services. You should be thinking of ways that you can find these LGBT businesses to empower them by buying things from them, by using their services. If you are a large business that tracks the kind of diversity supply chain that you have, make sure that LGBTQ plus businesses are in your disadvantaged/diverse business spend that you have. And if you are serious about making impacts with LGBT businesses, then track that and set goals and make sure that year after year, you're improving and meeting those goals to make sure that part of your commerce stream is shared with LGBT businesses.
Thank you for that. And I have another question, Zach, and I'm pretty sure this is for you. In your presentation, you shared that the black and brown stripes were added to the flag there. Can you expound upon that a little bit?
Yes. So Philadelphia is one of 4 cities in the country to have a permanent LGBTQ plus liaison executive director at the mayor's office. And with that, we also have a commission of folks who serve different terms. And the inaugural commission got together, and at that time in Philadelphia, there were major racism problems in our neighborhood. These problems with racism are happening all over the country. And Philadelphia is a place where we have very difficult conversations. So one of the ways that we determined that we could show support for Black and brown communities who felt like they weren't represented in typical LGBTQ plus celebrations or initiatives was to add the Black and brown stripe, to make all Pride celebrations and any sort of LGBT initiative more inclusive to all folks in the community. Somebody, an artist whose name I don't know, took that flag and added the trans stripes to it as well and put it in the arrow type form, and that's called the progress flag. So something that people should know is that the Pride flag has always been a flag in evolution. And we are evolving in spaces where we're able to have conversations about how the LGBTQ plus community spans every single racial and ethnic background and every socioeconomic class. And if we want to be a community that is inclusive, we have to do that in many different ways. And one of those is to create symbology around that that represents the goals that we have in moving forward in progress.
Thank you for that explanation, and that's good to know. I have another question that has come to me, and this is kind of a two-part question. And the first part of this question, and I'll wait for the answer, and Benjamin, we'll go with you, but then Zachary, feel free to chime in. How do you best market to an LGBTQ plus community from the business to business perspective?
The business to business perspective. Yeah, I think what I would probably say, and it's universal, I think, but it also from a B2B perspective as well. It's representation and authenticity. So when we've kind of in the last 6 months at PrideSource, we've started to help advertisers come up with their campaigns in addition to supporting their ads. And the biggest thing that we always try to start with is can you identify a story, and the goal is not to necessarily center it around somebody's identity, but to show diversity and show this community reflected back to them. Over and over, this is something that's really big in the surveys, which is I feel that representation matters. I want to see myself represented back in the marketing activities that are happening. And so we've helped folks to basically capture stories of oftentimes it's like the wedding industry is a great space for that, but I think I would say it's universal for B2C and B2B, and that is to make sure that you're representing the different kinds of individuals that are part of your base, your customer base, or your prospective customer base. And not necessarily to go look at this gay person. We have a gay person that buys our product or works with us, so much as to center it around what it is that you do, what your benefit is that you offer as a business, but to along the way show that it transcends straight versus LGBTQ or any of those sort of the different ways that someone might be marginalized. So it is about not to center it around someone's gayness and say, look, we have LGBTQ people, but to just show those LGBTQ people benefiting from a relationship with you in your discipline or what it is that you offer as a service or product. Zach, do you have anything you think?
No, that's really well said. I would add like 2 reactions to that. One is like, look at this gay person as kind of my job. People bring me in all the time as the gay person to talk to people. And the other reaction is that there are lots of opportunities for businesses to collaborate with LGBT-owned businesses to strengthen an RFP, for example. We get a lot of calls to our chamber where folks are submitting an RFP and maybe they're not a business at scale who's able to handle the entire project. But if they collaborate with another LGBT business, it not only increases the amount of diversity that they have within this RFP project, but you're also combining with somebody who's able to do half the job, and then you create these long-lasting business relationships. So the only thing that I would add to Benjamin's excellent answer is looking to collaborate with LGBT businesses that might be able to help you with your projects at scale.
That's such a good point, Zach. I think it's great too, because when you think of it from that perspective, you also have an opportunity to ask questions that maybe you're not you're earlier in your journey of understanding, and so through those opportunities you get the opportunity to just for the same reason why Ken, you offered anonymous questions of like creating safe spaces for people to ask questions that might be offensive if we're not all in agreement that we're here to be better or do better. So
absolutely. Hey, we just talked about that a little bit in our last breakout room about how one of the things that I would prescribe is for everybody to like have a culture of grace around answering questions about your own identity for other people and letting questions that people might think are stupid be asked. Because what we have found is that sometimes people are so afraid of saying the wrong thing that they would rather not work with an LGBTQ plus business or have LGBTQ plus employees around because of the fear of legal recourse or offending somebody. And if you could just ask these questions, it creates an open environment for a lot of people. And most, I think, LGBTQ plus people are happy to do the question and answer period with other people. I think that we're kind of used to it right now. I should say it's never the minority's job to educate the majority on anything when it comes to racism, when it comes to transphobia, when it comes to homophobia, any of those things. But I think that many folks in our community are offering that that culture of grace around wanting you to be educated so that we can have a great relationship together that may or may not involve some sort of commerce.
Thank you for that. And I grinned when you said that. In doing this work, I use the word grace frequently in having some of these discussions that can be tough. So the second part to that question, and thanks for your expertise on that, was how can folks authentically wave the rainbow flag and not have it look like rainbow washing?
That's a great question. I think, Zach, do you mind if I go first?
Please do.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's so many examples of how this can be done well and poorly. And I will say that it's not everybody always agrees on when it's been done right. But I think the through line is that if you are looking to put the rainbow on a product because you think it will sell well, and there's not some level of thoughtfulness to it, either in terms of raising awareness for a cause that has to do with the community, or raising, or ideally, raising proceeds or funds for an organization that does do good work in this space. So like, for example, Target right now, I know I talked about them as being an example of someone who's got a great relationship in terms of numbers. They have last year, I believe it was maybe 2019, they had a lot of rainbow products, and there was no clarity about if any proceeds were going to be donated to any group, if it was going to do any good, or if it was just about putting a rainbow on something to sell it. Skittles got this too with their label that they did for June as well. But then there are other examples like Absolute, Barefoot, and a ton of other brands who do this well, and what they do is they center it around fundraising and doing good. So I think that's the biggest thing I would just say is that is be transparent about it and do good. There's a ton of really great Michigan-based nonprofits on the west side. There's the Ruth Ellis Center in Southeast Michigan, who does amazing work, and that walk the walk I think is huge. So.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if the flag is the sum total of your efforts to reach out to the LGBTQ plus community, that's probably just rainbow washing. We are not only a loyal community when it comes to being consumers, but we are also excellent detectives when it comes to authenticity. And if your flag doesn't come along with comprehensive protections for your employees, or gender neutral bathrooms, or inclusive language in your advertising or in your employee packages, or donations, like Benjamin said, to places that really matter to LGBTQ plus folks, we will sniff that out. And we talk amongst each other. And so I would say that walking the walk, talking the talk, it's vitally important if you're reaching out to the community. And, Pride is a rodeo we've been to many times before, and we know what's authentic and what's not. And I hope that people would reach out to folks and find ways to be genuine and do what's best for their employees.
Thank you for that. And along the same lines, and if I could just bookmark us for a moment here, getting several questions coming to me. I will do my best to get to all of them, but there's a chance that we might not, but I will do my best. One of the things, this is along the line of the rainbow washing. If someone is not part of the LGBTQ plus community, but they're trying to do something around Pride Month, what recommendations do you have how they can still be sincere, but acknowledge the month, and not look like they're trying to take advantage of that? And I hope I'm asking the question.
Yeah, I can start on that if you want. So first of all, we love allies. Allies are great. Not everybody can be part of the LGBTQ plus community. As I always say, nobody's perfect. I would also say that if your total of LGBT engagement is happening during Pride Month, then that's not going to come off as authentic. And so we would love to be reached out to during Pride Month. I always say that folks that work in the LGBT space, like me and Benjamin, June is like, for us, what elves are experiencing in December. We're busy from midnight on May 31st through June 30th at midnight, where people always want our input, and then there's just like crickets around the 4th of July. So reach out to gay folks all year long. It need not be during Pride Month. And your celebration at Pride Month, if it's the first thing you're doing, should be a kickoff for year-long engagement with LGBTQ plus communities, instead of just a moment in time where you can recognize a marginalized community for a few important moments.
That's great. That's a great answer. I think, yeah, definitely echoing that starting in June. I think one good example from Ann Arbor that we worked closely with was the new Blue Llama Jazz Club, which is on Main Street. And just to echo that sort of like find ways to partner with good organizations when you want to do something like that, do some good along with your June celebration. They did a fundraiser in August that was it was drag queen bingo. It was so much fun. And it was all to raise funds for the Gin Toy Community Center, which is a great resource center in Bron Court. So yeah, looking for programming, looking for events outside of June intentionally to supplement what you're going to do in June, and then finding great organizations to support. Okay.
Thank you again. This is a great discussion. One more question, and Zachary, you actually alluded to this when you were doing some of the LGBTQ 101, it's the Q in the LGBTQ. And sometimes the word queer can be controversial. Just what is your take on that? Is that an acceptable term? Is it an outdated term? Just your opinions on that word and the use of it.
Sure, it's definitely controversial, and this is one man's opinion on it, but I like queer as a catch-all for our entire community. I think reclaiming words that were once pejorative is something powerful that our community does. But I do know that, for example, my friends at the Nashville Chamber were going to do an event that was called Queer, but they did a survey with their membership, and 68% of their membership came back and said that queer was an offensive word to them, so they didn't use that. In Philadelphia, it's a hyper-progressive city where most people use queer as a catch-all to talk about the LGBTQ plus community. My mom, when I used the word queer at home once, was like, isn't that like the equivalent of a curse within your community? And it really does depend on your audience and who you're talking to. I think that if you are if you're a business who's going to use it, you should employ the services of somebody like Benjamin to find out if your constituents are those kind of people who are going to approve the use of that word or not. And if you're straight, you shouldn't use it at all. I'll just throw that out there. I think that it's generally for people within the LGBTQ plus community, and you can use it once given permission to, but I would not lead off with it if you're an allied part of our community.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a definite age demographic shift too. I would say there's a correlation to sort of folks in the community who are in maybe closer to baby boomer generation, not so comfortable with it. I would say that Gen Z, for example, millennials, much more comfortable with it as a term. And then I think, yeah, catch-all is a great way to think of it. I sometimes think of it for myself, because I like to use that term, is a little bit of a rejection of the need for such defined terms. There's a lot of gray area between everything, and I think to that point of like catch-all, it's like it's a spectrum. It isn't I'm this or I'm that. So.
Thank you, and I apologize. I'm not going to get to everyone's question. We have time for about maybe one or two more, depending on how long it takes, and then we're going to head to our conclusion because we promised to have this concluded by 6 o'clock. One of the questions, and this actually came up, it's in the chat to me, and then also it came up in our breakout groups, where both of you alluded to the stats about the stereotype or the misnomer that gay white males have a lot of discretionary income. Just can you expound upon that a little bit about, why do we think that is, and the correlation with disposable income for people from the LGBTQ plus community?
You can go, Zach, again.
You can
you
start. You can start if you want to, because I want to look up stats really quick about a testimony I just did with Philadelphia City Council about how LGBTQ plus communities were disproportionately affected during the COVID crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting because there's reports that will tell you one, and to Zach's point, there are reports that'll tell you others. We've got numbers that say that it is a group with high income, and then there are many other. Sometimes even the same study will give you evidence that says that it's not quite as much that stereotype. I think the thing that I would say is there's a difference between, and this comes from Todd Evans from Rivendell. He talks about how there's a difference between like take-home income and discretionary or disposable income. And so there's a great deal of discretionary income that can be used for luxury services or services like that one might not necessarily budget for if they're under tight purse strings. And so I think that's kind of where I typically land on it. Is I would say that it's a very, it's folks coming from all walks of lives. And people who are coming from different home situations that inform whether or not they were able to get educated, get good jobs. So that there is definitely, there certainly is that group. And oftentimes the marketing can be pointed towards that. But it's not homogenous, I think. More complicated than that, just like any group. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add that, like I said, I think it's also a problem of representation, right? Because the only LGBTQ plus people we see on TV, or that we did see on TV for the beginning of representation for the queer community, were white cisgender men with disproportionately wild amounts of money. But let me read you something from a testimony that I just gave to City Council. Compared with the general population, LGBTQ plus people are at greater risk for experiencing economic insecurities due to disproportionate economic hardships, such as higher rates of poverty and unemployment, greater food insecurity, vulnerability to homelessness, and work discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. These conditions and disparities predate the pandemic, but they've also been exacerbated by it. A key driver of unemployment instability and unemployment among LGBTQ plus communities is the prevalence of discrimination when attempting to enter the workforce and maintain employment. 1/3 of LGBTQ plus Americans reported that discrimination moderately or significantly affected their ability to be hired. 1/3 of LGBTQ plus Americans had their work hours reduced during the coronavirus pandemic, and 2/3 of LGBTQ plus households have experienced financial problems during the coronavirus pandemic. So when we're talking about the LGBTQ plus community, we do mean more than just white cisgender men. We are a demographic that spans every single socioeconomic class, and often the marginalized situations that we're in make workplaces more hostile, make marginalization in workplaces more likely. Even getting interviews for folks, especially in the most marginalized of the LGBTQ plus community, like the trans community, there's a major under and unemployment crisis. So when we're talking about the queer community as a whole, there's some real economic problems that we're experiencing. And while Benjamin's statistics about having so much of this disposable income is absolutely correct, that doesn't mean it's disposable income that is flowing through the entire queer community. It's often just in a very small part of it that is really stratified in ways that is dangerous to many people's lives.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. I know this is a conversation that could continue on, but we have to be respectful to the time parameters of our program. I can say in just a moment, my colleague Emily is going to close us out, but I did want to say, Benjamin, next time I'm in the Ann Arbor area, Zingerman's on you. Zachary, you talked about your connection to Philadelphia sports. The Sixers aren't looking that bad this year, so we'll see what happens with the playoffs on the horizon. But thank you so much. Emily, will you please take us to conclusion?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ken. And thank you again, Zach and Benjamin. What an incredible hour and a half, and so much information was shared, and we really appreciate it. So thank you for taking your time and sharing your expertise with our attendees. I would once again like to thank our sponsors for this event. Sorry, my screen just went off. We would like to thank Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, Grand Valley State University, Metro Health, University of Michigan Health, Warner Norcross and Judd LLP, and Spectrum Health. I'd also like to remind you of a few chamber updates. If you're interested in learning more about engagement opportunities with OutPro, please connect with me or with Ken. Chantel is sharing our emails in the chat. Our next OutPro event will be scheduled or is scheduled for Wednesday, August 18th. And it's our hope that we'll be able to gather safely for an in-person event. Please watch our website for further information though. Next Tuesday, May 18th, we will explore the untapped labor market of refugees in our diversity and talent series. Online registration is still open. As a friendly reminder, you will receive a survey following today's event asking that you rate your overall experience, 1 being the lowest score and 10 being the highest. Your feedback is very important to us as it allows us to continually enhance our programs. Again, thank you, Zach, and thank you, Benjamin. Thank you to our breakout session hosts. Thank you all for coming and participating. And this concludes our program for the day. Have a great week. Thanks all.